What is your origin story and why should you care? Hi, I'm Beth Strathman. Welcome back to my channel, Profanely Sacred, dedicated to your personal growth and development. Today I'm talking about your origin story, the story that you have created in your head or that you know factually about how you were born, how you were raised, etc. And we'll talk also about why you should care about that. Basically, your origin story is about the significant events of you, your birth, growing up in your family, particularly your early years. It usually it can start as early as in utero, when you were a fetus inside your mother's womb, up through, particularly when you started going to school, like kindergarten or first grade. It can stretch all the way through your childhood as well, but the most significant events tend to be those that have happened in infancy and childhood. Those are the ones that tended to shape you the most. These events that happened earlier in your life shaped how you see the world, but more importantly, how you see yourself and your relationship to your parents. And that shapes things when you grow up into adulthood. It then affects how you show up in your job, in your family, your own family, and it also shapes your relationships, particularly your significant romantic relationships. So just think of events from your childhood that you remember. We don't remember them all, and we certainly don't remember them accurately, but whatever you remember, those things that stand out as transformative, that they provided some insight for you when you were a kid, or things that were difficult, and of course, things that were very positive, anything that stands out to you from your childhood. And that's what your origin story is pretty much based on. So it goes like this. When you're an infant and a small child, you think that when you're an infant in particular, you think that you are merged with your mother or whoever is your primary caregiver. You know, you don't see yourself as separate from the people who are taking care of you. So you really identify and think that that's all a part of you. As infants and children, and maybe even as adults, we think we're the center of the world, but particularly when you're an infant. So you think as the center of the world that everything that happens is about you and because of you. So in that sense, when maybe your needs don't get taken care of right away, that is, maybe the diaper doesn't get changed as fast as you would like because it's uncomfortable, or your next feeding doesn't happen when you are really, really hungry. At a certain age, at around like 9 months or so, 7 to 11 months, there's a moment, psychologists believe, when you notice that your caregiver, usually your mother or your father, is not looking at you and making eye contact and really responding to you. They're distracted in some way. And that's the point at which you start to figure out that they're different than you, they're separate from you. But while this is all going on, from the time you're born, up until your early 20s anyway, your cerebral cortex, that is the function in your brain that's attributed to planning and logic and analysis, that part of your brain is not fully formed. So when you're an infant in particular, you can't process what's going on in your world. You can't rationalize and say, oh, I see that my mother's busy and that's why she's trying to get my bottle, but it's not coming as fast as I'd like. No, you don't see the world that way. You are processing your world through your brainstem, which is basically your reptilian brain, and your limbic brain, which is about emotions. And so you are just not really able to understand what is going on. So instead of having the ability to rationalize and use logic and analysis for what's happening in your world, instead you are interpreting the world through those more primary brain structures. And so you start to think, again, because the world is all about you, that the reason they're not responding to you is because you're doing something that maybe they don't like. Now, here's what's really important. You are a dependent little creature. You need people to take care of you. You can't go get that bottle yourself. You can't change your own diapers. You can't comfort yourself very well when you're uncomfortable in some other way. So you are depending on your parents to take care of you. And because of that dependency, then, just as a mammal, you need to stay attached to other people so that they will take care of you. So because of that need, that mammalian need, then you try to adapt and put your own instincts and needs to the side somewhat and figure out maybe how you can not notice that you're as hungry as you are, or as wet, or as your diaper is as dirty as it might be, or that you're uncomfortable in some way. And you figure out ways to either you might distract yourself, you might tell yourself, well, it's not that bad, I'll just ignore it. Or you'll try to please your parents by cooing and maybe smiling and laughing a little more so that they will stay attached to you. So we develop these coping mechanisms and beliefs about what's going on so that we stay attached to our parents. For example, you might develop the belief that, they're not doing that because maybe I'm just this weak little critter and they want something stronger, or I'm not lovable in some way, so I need to figure out how to be more lovable, or I'm not worthy enough, so I got to figure out a way to be worth their while. So, and of course, it's probably not that cogent of a thought, but in any way, shape, or form, you develop these coping beliefs and behaviors so that you stay attached to your parents. So as Gabor Mate says, in a nutshell, he basically talks about how then we are learning to adapt as little infants to stay attached to our caregivers. So we ignore our needs and do some other coping mechanisms to be able to ignore our own needs, because that attachment is more important than our own instincts and biological needs that are more authentically ours. So why should you care about your origin story? Well, because at bottom, there's a lot of untruth to it. When you were an infant and a little kid, your brain was primed for learning. So everything that you experienced then and your perception of it got really hardwired into your brain. And you created neural networks about some of these false beliefs about how you needed to show up, or maybe that your parents weren't paying enough attention to you when actually they probably were. But you basically created a story that it's not 100% true. And what happens then is, as you grow up, you continue down the path with those same beliefs and using those same coping mechanisms that helped keep you safe and attached to your parents and enabled you to survive. But as you get older, you might find that they sometimes get in your way. So in essence, as Gabor Mate talks about, in infancy and childhood, you chose attachment to your parents and survival over staying authentically true to your own needs and your own instincts. So, for example, some of the beliefs and behaviors you may have developed then that, of course, you grew up with and you took them on into your adulthood. You might be, for example, a people pleaser, believing that you need to put other people's needs ahead of yours and really do nice things for other people and take care of other people instead of primarily taking care of yourself. Maybe when you were an infant, your coping mechanism was to distract yourself with objects in the room, so that you would kind of be distracted from the idea that your diaper needed to be changed, or you were hungry and waiting for it to be fed. Or maybe you decided as an infant that the reason why the parents weren't bringing the food or diapering you quickly enough was because you were this weak little thing, and maybe if you became a strong little thing and independent and you didn't need their help, that they would be attached to you better and you would survive. So there's all kinds, those are just some examples. There's all kinds of coping mindsets that people develop during infancy and childhood. But as an adult, of course, if you're a people pleaser and you continue to put other people's needs ahead of yourself, then what you're going to find is that you are exhausted, and you probably develop some resentment in your life for the people you love, which is not a healthy thing. Also, if you're the distractible type, you might be very distractible at work, and maybe it impacts the kind of job that you do. Or even worse, to get distracted, you may turn to possible addictions, not only drugs and alcohol, but shopping or gambling, all kinds of stuff that we can be distracted by. And those things aren't very healthy for you. If you thought you were a weak little critter and you needed to be the strong one, then you develop those coping behaviors of being independent, but never accepting help from other people, and also trying to show your strength by cutting yourself off from your emotions, or sometimes even being physically intimidating to others when you don't need to be. So again, those are just the examples, but there are all kinds of ways that in adulthood, those coping mechanisms don't work for us anymore, and they actually negatively impact us at home and at work. So understanding your origin story is important because it explains how you're showing up as an adult in ways that you might be getting in your own way and not being as effective, particularly in your relationships, as you could be. Understanding your origin story could also be a way to understand more particularly those issues you're having, and to be able to deal with those limiting beliefs and coping mechanisms, coping behaviors that you developed, so that you can more fully tap into authentically who you are and what you really need to thrive as an adult. So your origin story is an important thing. And now it might be time to take a look at what's working for you and what's working against you. Thanks for watching.